My daughter-in-law banned me from seeing my grandkids, and it destroyed her own marriage. I'm sitting at my kitchen table right now, 2:47 in the morning, and my hands are still shaking a little. Not from fear, not even from anger, just from everything. My son showed up at my door tonight at midnight, eyes red, voice cracked open like old wood, and the first thing he said when I opened the door wasn't, "Mom, I need help," or "Mom, I messed up." He just stood there under the porch light and said, "You were the only one who never used me." That sentence, I need you to sit with that for a second, because a year ago, I wasn't even allowed to see my grandchildren without a formal invitation. A year ago, I was too simple to be part of their lives. A year ago, the woman my son married made me feel like I was an embarrassment, like my love for those kids was something to manage and contain. And now she's gone. And my son is sitting at my kitchen table, eating the soup I heated up at midnight. And the whole ugly truth is finally on the surface. I don't even know where to start. But I have to tell this story because I think a lot of you out there know exactly what this feels like. My name doesn't matter. I'm 61 years old. I'm a retired school librarian from a small town in Ohio. I raised my son Daniel by myself after his father left when Daniel was 9. We didn't have much: secondhand clothes, a secondhand car, a house that needed more work than we could afford. But we had each other, and I made sure he knew that every single day. Daniel is smart, genuinely brilliant, the kind of kid who read every book in the house and then started reading mine. He got a full scholarship to Ohio State, majored in finance, went on to get his MBA. I cried at every graduation. I mean, ugly cried, the kind where you can't even take a decent photo because your face is doing things you can't control. He met Kayla his second year of grad school. She was studying marketing. Sharp, ambitious, beautiful in that precise, put-together way. She had a whole personality that felt curated: the right clothes, the right opinions, the right Instagram captions. I noticed all of that. But I told myself I was being unfair. Daniel loved her, and for a long time she seemed to love him back. They got married when he was 29. I helped plan the wedding. I hand-addressed 240 envelopes because Kayla said my handwriting was charming. I stayed up 3 nights making centerpiece arrangements because her mother couldn't fly in early enough. I genuinely thought we were building something together. When their first kid, Emma, was born, I drove 3 hours to the hospital the same day. And when their second, Ryan, came along 18 months later, I was already on the road before Kayla even finished the text. For almost 3 years, I was there nearly every day, not hovering, not interfering, just helping. I picked up Emma from daycare when Kayla had meetings. I brought food. I sat on their living room floor doing puzzles with a 2-year-old while Ryan slept on my chest. Those were the best years of my life since Daniel was small. I should have paid more attention to when things started to shift. Daniel got promoted. Senior VP of Risk Management at a financial firm based in Columbus. It was a big deal. A genuinely big deal. The kind of job where suddenly you're flying to Chicago for meetings and your name is on the door and your salary has a number you don't say out loud at family dinners. I was so proud of him, I thought my chest would crack open. But something changed in Kayla almost immediately. Not gradually, almost like a switch. The first thing I noticed was the house. They'd been in a nice colonial in the suburbs. But within 2 months of Daniel's promotion, they bought a new house, much bigger, a whole different neighborhood, the kind with a homeowners association and a community pool and a very specific idea of who belongs there. I visited once and she gave me this tour. And I kept nodding and saying how beautiful everything was because it was beautiful. But there was something in the way she showed me the kitchen, this enormous magazine cover kitchen, and then looked at me waiting, like she wanted me to feel something. I don't know. Maybe I was reading too much into it. Then came the comments, small ones at first. She'd say things like, "Oh, Daniel mentioned you used to clip coupons. That's so practical." Or, "Emma keeps calling her blanket her blankie. I wonder where she picked that up." Little things that landed weird, but that you could technically explain away. Then one Sunday, I showed up with a casserole. I always brought food. It was just what I did. And Kayla opened the door, and there was this pause before she let me in. This half-second pause that told me the whole story, even if I couldn't read it yet. "We're actually doing a whole foods thing now," she said. "No processed ingredients." My casserole had cream of mushroom soup in it, a can. I drove home with the casserole, and I ate it for dinner alone. And I sat with the feeling that something was wrong, but I couldn't name it yet. And then she started scheduling the visits. It started as a suggestion. "Hey, just so we can plan better, maybe text before you come." Sure. Reasonable. I texted. Then it became, "Call first." Okay. I called. Then it was, "We need at least 48 hours notice." Fine, I gave notice. Then it was, "We're pretty busy this month. Let's try for next weekend." And next weekend became, "Actually, we have plans." And plans became a wall. I went from seeing Emma and Ryan 5 days a week to maybe twice a month, then once a month. I started keeping count in a little notebook because it felt like I was losing my mind, like I was imagining the distance, making it bigger than it was. But the notebook didn't lie. October, 2 visits. November, 1. December. We spent Christmas morning together for exactly 2 hours before Kayla said the kids needed their nap and ushered me to the door. Ryan was 2.5. He looked at me from the top of the stairs as I was putting on my coat, and he said, "Grandma go?" in this confused little voice. And I said, "Yes, baby, Grandma has to go." And I got to my car before I started crying. I talked to Daniel. Of course I talked to Daniel. He always said the same things. "She's stressed. The kids have a routine. She's not trying to hurt you, Mom." He said it like he was reciting it, like he'd practiced, and maybe he had. Maybe Kayla had given him the script, and he just delivered it because it was easier than fighting, because he was exhausted, because when you work 70-hour weeks and come home to a beautiful house full of beautiful things, you tell yourself everything must be fine. I started filling the empty hours with things I'd let slide. I reorganized my bookshelves. I learned to make bread from scratch. I drove to the library, my old library, where I'd worked for 22 years and volunteered on Tuesday afternoons, reading to the little kids who came in with their daycare groups, 3- and 4-year-olds who grabbed my hands and wanted to sit in my lap and didn't care one bit whether I was simple or sophisticated. They just wanted the story. I don't think I've ever loved my Tuesday afternoons as much as I did that year. But every holiday was a small funeral. Thanksgiving, 2 hours. Then the kids needed their routine. Easter, they were going to Kayla's parents. Emma's birthday, a party I was invited to at the last minute, a house full of people I didn't know, standing by the snack table holding a juice box, while Emma opened gifts from people who barely knew her name. Ryan toddled over to me at one point and climbed into my lap without asking, the way kids do when they remember something safe. Kayla watched from across the room and said nothing, but she didn't have to. That look was its own sentence. I wonder now how many times Kayla had fed him those lines. And then came the conversation I will never forget for as long as I live. I'd asked to come see the kids on a Saturday. Emma had a dance recital, and I'd been promised a seat. I'd bought a little bouquet of flowers, pink ones, because Emma loved pink. I drove the 3 hours, got there right on time. Kayla met me at the door. She did not invite me in. She said, and I'm quoting this exactly because it burned itself into my brain. She said, I think it's important that the kids have certain influences in their lives as they grow up. And honestly, I need them to be around people who fit where we are now as a family. I stood there holding the pink flowers. She kept going. She said I was lovely. Her word, lovely, like I was a piece of furniture, but that my background made her uncomfortable with the dynamic. And then she actually said out loud to my face, I just think you're a little too simple for the world they're being raised in. Too simple. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. I turned around and I walked back to my car, and I put the flowers on the passenger seat, and I drove away, and I didn't cry until I hit the highway. I didn't tell Daniel what she said, not that day. Maybe I should have. But what was I supposed to do? Start a war? He loved her. She was the mother of his children. I went quiet. And quiet can be its own kind of damage. For about 8 months, I pulled back completely. I answered Daniel's calls. I sent the kids birthday cards with gift cards inside. I was terrified to pick the wrong thing. I didn't push. I didn't show up. I followed every rule, even though no one had written the rules down. But something was happening that I couldn't see. Daniel started calling more. At first, I thought he was just checking in on me, doing the good son thing. But the calls got longer, more searching. He'd ask about our old neighbors, about my friends from the library. He'd ask what I was cooking, like he was hungry for something that had nothing to do with food. Once he said, do you remember when we used to drive to that diner in Marysville on Sunday mornings? He said it like he was breathing through something. Of course, I said. Long pause. That was nice. I didn't push, but I started to feel something, a vibration in the background, the way you can sometimes hear a storm coming before the sky changes. There was one phone call where I heard Kayla's voice in the background, sharp, flat, the way you talk when you're furious but performing calm. And then Daniel said, let me call you back, Mom. And then there was nothing for 4 days. And then he called back and his voice was different, smaller. He didn't say anything was wrong. But he asked me out of nowhere if I still had the paperwork from when we refinanced the old house. My name, the process, how it worked. Why? I asked. Just curious, he said. Just thinking about stuff. I should have pressed. I didn't. I thought I was still in the phase where I wasn't allowed to ask too many questions. I'd been trained to be careful. I had no idea what was already unraveling behind that beautiful magazine cover kitchen. He showed up at 12:08 a.m. on a Tuesday. I heard the knock, and my first thought, I'm ashamed to say, was that something had happened to the kids. I practically fell getting to the door. It was Daniel, standing on my porch, in sweatpants and a jacket that wasn't zipped up even though it was 40 degrees. Eyes that looked like he hadn't slept in days. Maybe hadn't. I let him in. I didn't ask anything. I just put water on and cut the bread that was on the counter and waited. He sat at the kitchen table, the same kitchen table we sat at when he was failing algebra in 8th grade, when he got his first girlfriend, when he found out he got into Ohio State, and he stared at the bread for a while. Then he started talking. It came out slow at first, then all at once. 4 months after Daniel's promotion, Kayla had opened 3 credit cards in his name. Not joint cards, his name, his social, without him knowing. She'd said she was handling finances while he worked the insane hours that came with the new role. He trusted her. He was traveling, building a career, coming home exhausted. He trusted her. She spent $94,000 in 11 months, and he said the number twice. $94,000. I watched his mouth say it, and I still couldn't fully process it. The new house had a second mortgage she'd taken out without telling him. She'd forged some documents or found loopholes. I didn't understand all of it. And she'd maxed out every card. She'd opened accounts at 2 different banks. She'd been making minimum payments on everything, just enough to keep it invisible, while the interest stacked up underneath like water rising in a basement. He found out because one of the cards went to a different address, a mistake on the application, and the bill got forwarded to his office by accident. His assistant had slipped it into his mail pile without thinking. He'd opened it at his desk on a Monday afternoon. A credit card with his name on it that he'd never applied for. $11,000 in debt. Purchases that read like a second life. Spa treatments, international transfers, an interior designer he'd never met. Something called lifestyle consulting. He said he went cold. Just cold all over. He'd come home that night and asked Kayla about it. She cried. She apologized. She said she'd panicked after the promotion, that she'd felt pressure to become a certain kind of person, to compete with people in their new neighborhood. She said she just wanted to give them a good life. She said she'd fix it. He almost let her, almost. But then he started checking. Once you know to look, you find things. And what he found was so much bigger than $11,000. They were looking at bankruptcy, not uncomfortable money trouble, actual, structural, life-altering bankruptcy. The house was at risk. His credit was destroyed. And Kayla had known about it, all of it, for at least 6 months and hadn't said a word. He'd spent the past 2 weeks with lawyers and financial advisors, unable to sleep, barely eating, carrying the whole weight of it alone. And tonight, whatever inside him had been holding it together had finally given out. So he got in the car and drove to me. I didn't say anything for a long time. I just looked at my son, this smart, good, earnest man I'd raised alone. And I thought about all those credit cards and all those secret accounts, and I thought about Kayla at my door telling me I was too simple. Too simple for her world, the world she'd built on his name and his credit, while I was banned from seeing my grandchildren. I'm not going to pretend I was a saint about it. I'm human. There was a part of me, a part I'm not proud of, but I'm not going to lie about either. That felt something cold and righteous move through me, like, yes, there it is. There's the truth. And some small, ugly corner of my heart said she called me simple. But mostly I just felt grief. For Daniel, for Emma and Ryan, for the life they thought they had. I didn't say I told you so. I never said Kayla's name in a mean way that night. I just sat with him until 4 a.m. and let him talk. And then I made up the guest room and told him to sleep. In the morning, he made calls, more lawyers, more advisors. I drove to the grocery store and bought food and came back and cooked, because it was the only thing I knew how to do with my hands. While the eggs were scrambling, I kept thinking about the casserole, the cream of mushroom soup casserole I'd driven 3 hours to bring, that sat on my passenger seat all the way home. $94,000, a can of soup. The math of it made something in my chest go sideways. The next few months were hard in a way I can't fully describe. Daniel moved in with me for a while, not forever. Not in a giving up way, just while things got sorted. He slept in his old room, which I'd turned into a craft room years ago, but still had the twin bed pushed against the wall. He didn't say anything about the craft supplies. He just moved some bins to the closet and made his bed every morning like he was 12 again. And I let him, because some things you just need to not talk about. He went to work. He came home. He ate dinner. Some nights we talked, and some nights we just watched TV, and some nights he sat at the kitchen table with papers spread everywhere. And a look on his face I remembered from when he used to study for exams, that same specific tension in his jaw that meant he was refusing to give up on something. I was proud of him for that. I still am. Kayla and he went to mediation. There were arguments I didn't hear because I wasn't in the room, conversations I wasn't part of. He wanted to try counseling. She wasn't interested. I don't know all of what happened between them. It wasn't mine to know. What I do know is this: the marriage didn't survive. Not because of me, not because of what I thought or felt or didn't say. It didn't survive because the foundation of it had been built on something that wasn't real. She'd built a version of her life that required constantly maintaining an image, the house, the neighborhood, the right people, the right everything. And at some point, the cost of the image outpaced the ability to pay for it. And instead of telling him, instead of coming to him as a partner, she hid. She hid it under credit cards. She hid it under cutting off the people in his life who might have noticed something was wrong. She hid it under telling me I was too simple, because if I was simple, I could be dismissed. And if I could be dismissed, I couldn't ask questions. That's what too simple was really about. Not class, not background, not the can of cream of mushroom soup. She was afraid I'd see her. Daniel said that to me one afternoon, sitting on the back porch with coffee. He said, "She always thought you were watching her, not in a bad way. She said once that you noticed things. She didn't like that. I did notice things, I always had. But I told myself it was just anxiety, just the adjustment of a new family dynamic. I hadn't trusted my own eyes. I'm going to trust my own eyes a lot more going forward." It's been 7 months now. The divorce is finalized. Daniel is rebuilding his credit in a way that would make any financial advisor cringe, but is somehow, slowly, working. He's in a smaller apartment, a good one, warm, with a real kitchen, and Emma and Ryan come every other weekend. And so do I. They come to my house on Saturdays now. We do what we've always done. Emma sits at this exact kitchen table and colors while I make her the pancakes she's been eating since she was old enough to hold a fork. Ryan, who is 4 now and obsessed with dinosaurs, has decided that my backyard is a jungle and he's an explorer. And I have to call him Dr. Ryan or he won't answer. I won't pretend it's not complicated. There's still Kayla. She's their mother. She's finding her own road through whatever this has cost her. And I genuinely hope she finds something real on the other side. Not because I owe her grace. I'm still working on that, honestly. But because those kids need her to be okay. And so I hold the anger loosely. I try to. Daniel asked me once if I ever wished I'd said something sooner. If I'd fought harder. I thought about it for a real while. I don't know, I told him. I think fighting harder might have just made you choose, and I didn't want you to have to choose. He got quiet. Then, "You were the only one who never used me." And I looked at him, my son, 41 years old, a little worn, a little wiser, eating soup at midnight at the kitchen table we've had since he was 12, and I didn't say anything dramatic. I didn't need to. Some people mistake love for simplicity. They think if something is quiet, it must be weak. If someone doesn't demand, doesn't perform, doesn't build a whole identity out of wanting to be impressive, well, they must not have much to offer. But here's the thing about quiet love. It stays. When everything else is exposed for what it really was. The big house, the right neighborhood, the carefully curated image, quiet love is still just sitting at the table, with bread and water and the light on. She thought she was cutting away the unnecessary. She cut away the only thing that was real. And I'm not glad she's suffering. I'm really not. But I tell you this, the next time someone tells me I'm too simple, I'm going to think about my son showing up at midnight and my grandkids calling me grandma like I'm the best word they know. Simple is fine. Simple means I showed up. Simple means I stayed. That's all I've got. And it turned out to be enough. If this story hit close to home, if you've ever been pushed out by someone who is afraid of what you might see, I want to hear about it. Drop it in the comments to tell me your version, because I have a feeling a lot of you have been sitting in your cars outside someone's house with pink flowers wondering what you did wrong. You didn't do anything wrong. And if this story meant something to you, share it. Send it to the person who needs it. And if you want more stories like this, real ones, messy ones, the kind that don't have a perfect ending but have a true one, subscribe. We're all just trying to make sense of the people who were supposed to love us. I'll see you next time.